As a constitutional law attorney, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and last night was a town hall with Governor Ron DeSantis on CNN, of all places, moderated by Jake Tapper, and there were undecided voters who are from the state of Iowa that got to participate and actually ask questions. This format, I thought, was really great and actually much more productive for the average voter in terms of substance than any of the prior GOP debates. In fact, one commentator said afterwards that this was a lot better in terms of an intellectual discussion rather than the kind of gladiator-style takedown that have been the last four GOP debates. And I think this is important for voters to truly consider what Governor DeSantis is saying in terms of his policy and his wins compared and contrasted to Donald Trump. He was asked specifically several times about his perspective contrasted to Donald Trump, and he had some really good responses. He even mentioned that in 2016, he rallied for former President Trump and was very excited for his administration, but that Donald Trump simply didn't fulfill all of his campaign promises, like, for example, building the wall. This is what he had to say.
But former President Trump still holds a commanding lead in the state, at least according to the Des Moines Register poll. What is your strategy to convince Iowans like Tim to pick you and not Trump?
Well, first of all, Iowa voters will choose, not pundits and polls. I'm sick of these polls. Haven't we learned as Republicans that we were supposed to have a red wave in November of 2022? What happened to that? The polls were telling us Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance to win the presidency 2016. That didn't happen. I look at my own reelection. A lot of these polls they'd put out, they'd say I was going to win by 4 or 5%. I won by 20%. So they're using the polls for a narrative. The reality is we've got the best organization anyone's ever had in Iowa. We've got tens of thousands of Iowans who've already committed to caucus for us. You have the opportunity to make this decision. Do not let the media choose your candidate. Do not let a pundit choose your candidate. Choose the candidate that's best going to represent your values.
Governor DeSantis also responded to questions about polling, because right now, some polls are showing him about 40 points or so behind former President Trump in the GOP primary. But I think that polls are just a bandwagon fallacy. This is something to make it seem like it is a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump will end up with the nomination. Just like in 2016, the polls suggested that it was a foregone conclusion that we would get a President Hillary Clinton. Thankfully, we didn't get that. And so what Governor DeSantis had to say about the polls was really excellent as well. Listen to this.
I think the first 3 years of the Trump administration, the economy's better than it has been. But that last year with COVID, I think was mishandled dramatically. I went to the rallies with Donald Trump. He said he was going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. And that didn't happen. I think, though, one thing in this race that I think is important to point out is Donald Trump flip-flopping on the right to life.
Do you think it's possible for the four candidates who made last Wednesday's debate stage to come together and throw your support behind one of you in an effort to create an actual competitor for President Trump?
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, Jessica. Well, look, I think that's what the Iowa caucus is. I think you guys choose who that person is. And I think I'm confident it's going to be me, because here's the thing. I'm the only one running that can beat Trump one-on-one. Why? Because the other candidates cannot get enough support from core Republicans and traditional conservatives to be able to go. You can't just win with a slice of the party. You got to have broad support. We'll be able to do that going forward. And also, I think the reason why I think I should be the guy, we need a change agent in Washington. We don't want somebody that's just going to go up there, be part of the establishment, rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. You know, I want real serious structural change. I want to see term limits for members of Congress. I want to see a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I want to see a line item veto for the president. I want to see agencies moved out of Washington, D.C. To other parts of the country. I want to see a reduction in the scope of government. And that's going to take a leader that has backbone, that's going to be willing to fight for you, and has a record of actually delivering big victories. I'm the only one running who's done 100% of my promises fulfilled in Florida. I'm also the only one running. If you look at the folks that are doing the bad policies on the left that's causing the problems in the country, I'm the only one running who's beat these people. We beat the teachers union with school choice. We beat Fauci on COVID. I beat Soros on the prosecutors, the left prosecutors that we removed. We beat the Dems on election integrity. So we have delivered victory after victory. That's what you deserve as the next president of the United States.
So that was a fantastic response on the polls. And I think Governor DeSantis is absolutely right that you should not allow pundits, commentators, or the polls to dictate or inform you how you should vote. And so this is going to be very important heading into Iowa in just a couple of weeks, and then also New Hampshire. Do endorsements even matter? Well, Team Trump certainly thinks so, but then they're also targeting Governor Reynolds for her endorsement of Governor DeSantis. So there's a lot going on, but ultimately, I think for conservatives and particularly Christians, we have to look at who is the best possible candidate to be put up against whoever the Democrat nominee is. Now, that is presumptively current President Joe Biden, but there's a lot of us, myself included, that don't think he's going to make it all the way through to the general election on the Democrat ticket. And again, polls are suggesting that Donald Trump might edge out Joe Biden in that match by around 4 points. But can we really trust the polls? And why should we have any confidence when over the last multiple elections, including the non-existent red wave in 2022, we saw that the polls were absurdly wrong? Governor DeSantis, again, just mentioned his own reelection that I remember even going into election night. Some of my fellow conservatives were concerned that Governor DeSantis wouldn't even get reelected in Florida. And then he ends up winning by 20 points. The polls are always faulty. So why do we even use them or tout them or even condemn them if they're not for our preferred candidate? So my guest today, Rob Salvador, who owns a tech company in Florida and is a surrogate for Ron DeSantis, is going to talk about the polls and why he agrees with me that these are just a bandwagon fallacy and that we need to completely ignore the polls, whether or not they are for our preferred candidate. So Rob Salvador will join me coming up next. With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to your to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you. Welcome back, and turning now to a little bit of the political news of the day and perspectives. You may have seen that the polls are what Donald Trump and his campaign have kind of been touting, and there have been a lot of some differences in terms of where the advantage actually lies. And so in terms of polls and can we trust them, I want to bring in Robert Salvador, who is the CEO of a tech company out of Florida. He also is, full disclosure, an advisor to Governor Ron DeSantis. And he joins me now to talk about the polls. So Rob, you and I have talked a little bit offline about this, but for people who are just generally unaware of how all of this works and how how it can tend to be manipulated. I like to call polls just kind of a giant bandwagon fallacy because you can manipulate them to kind of say and project almost like an expert witness on the stand, really whatever you want, and then say, oh, and look, this is what the majority of this demographic believes, or this is the position that they're taking. And so people sitting at home go, oh, if that's different than my opinion, well, I'm not in the majority. And so they tend to want to follow that bandwagon. So break this down for us a little bit on how all of this actually works and what you're observing in terms of the presidential race.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to be back, and always a pleasure to be here, Jenna. Well, so you described it pretty well. So these polls have almost no transparency to them. They appear more as a paid-for commercial than they do an actual statistical representation of who's going to win the election or who people are thinking about voting for at any given time. So to your point, I mean, there's many different ways that you can collect a sample. There is no requirements. There's no compliance. There's no registration with the government. So these polls come out, and they give some very basic information about where they gathered their results from. But at the end of the day, it's nowhere near enough information to prove if that data is actually valuable. You could be at the parking lot of a Trump rally, take a sample, and then release one of these polls that says, okay, we took a sample of likely Republican voters, and here's what they say. And you can tell how that is not a good sample set because it has bias in it. So I'll give two examples that have come out recently. One is Rasmussen reports, and the other is Trafalgar, both two polling organizations who, put out a ton of polls and who a lot of these mainstream media companies are using to put out their poll numbers. And we proved both of them statistically inaccurate all the time. And so, one example for Rasmussen, we went through their 2007, polls that they came out with, and we realized that they were completely wrong in 2007. They said Rudy Giuliani was going to win at this time in 2007. He didn't even finish top 5. We did the same thing with Trafalgar, basically showing that their polls in 2022 were completely wrong, and they proved everyone, that told everyone they were going to have a red wave, and it was wrong. So the point is, there is no transparency behind these polls, and if we're going to use these to represent democracy or claim to be a view of what people are thinking, we need to make sure they're accurate. Otherwise, it's just propaganda.
Yeah, and Rob Salvador, I think that's an apt term for it is propaganda, and is, as I've turned it, kind of a bandwagon fallacy to just say, okay, here's what we want you to think the majority of voters or the majority of whatever demographic it is are thinking, and the implicit message is, and therefore you should think that way too. I mean, we saw this really drastically in the 2016 election with, I still remember watching the New York Times projection ticker of saying it was something like 98% statistical probability that Hillary Clinton would win. And over the course of election night, it just went down and down and down and down because it was totally false and it wasn't accurate at all. But it was a propaganda tool to make everyone think that it was a foregone conclusion that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And so if we take that and apply it, to any issue, not even just the presidential primary, but any issue like what we just saw in Iowa with with their abortion measure, and we saw some of the polling that came out that said, oh well, we're the most pro-life generation ever, and so we're not going to allow this to pass, and then ultimately it did. Why do people still then believe in polls? I can understand why they would be utilized by propagandists and campaigns, but why do people still believe and trust in polls?
Yeah, well, I think it's really difficult because, for anyone who's done the research, on intelligence and intelligence agencies, it's been known for 30, 40, a long time, many years, about the effects of propaganda on people. There were many experiments and things done showing that if you constantly barrage people with information and messaging, even if it's not true, eventually at least some of them will start to believe it. And so if you look at these political campaigns, they're doing the same thing that the mainstream media does. It's just trying to put out enough propaganda, and eventually some people, will be impacted by it, and they'll vote in a certain way. Or like you said, they'll have that, kind of group bias. You see that right now. I'll give an example for Ron DeSantis is, that's because that's how the Trump campaign is basically strategizing to beat DeSantis. They know DeSantis is a better candidate kind of across the board. He doesn't have the baggage of Trump, all that. So the Trump campaign is using this propaganda to try and suppress the vote, to try and get people to not turn out for DeSantis or not donate to DeSantis. So these tools can be very powerful. When you don't have other information, most people don't know what's happening in politics right now. They have their own issues. They're focusing on inflation and, trying to take care of their kids and things like that. So you go to an organization that you think is providing a picture of that. And, you might not know any better if you're looking at propaganda. It's pretty telling when the ultra-popular governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, endorses Ron DeSantis. She has probably the best view of anyone in the world of what's going on the ground in Iowa. And then the next day and the week later, the polls still show Ron DeSantis going down. That just doesn't pass the smell test. The last thing I'll say on that, we dealt with this during COVID. During COVID, we were told 5,000 people died today from COVID. That's why we have to lock you down. And then a year later, we found out that 4,999 of them didn't die from COVID. They died in a car accident or something else. And so what we realized was the government was lying with statistics. It's a really easy thing to do. There's actually a book on it called How to Lie with Statistics. You're seeing that exact same thing with polls and these pay-to-play pollster organizations. And so I am making a call with many other people out there for transparency for these polls for the good of the United States.
Yeah, and I think that is a very worthy call to action, Rob Salvador. I mean, because the bottom line here is, regardless of who anyone supports in the primary, and I've been very open personally in my personal capacity that I support Governor DeSantis. I've endorsed him. I also support Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he's a great candidate as well. I support everything that Trump's done in his first term. So all of those things and those discussions aside, we need to make sure that our ability as voters to engage is not in any way tainted by some of this propaganda and genuine misinformation. And it's really fascinating to me, too, to see how, some of these camps will tout Twitter polls or now X polls that suggest that because they have, however many thousands of people that participate, when they're an account that is obviously geared toward one particular viewpoint and demographic, and suggesting that type of poll is representative of the whole just because of the number of people that engage that. And especially when you have the problem on X of bots, for example, and people who may not even be able to vote. Or, for example, if you have, something that is a state level issue, well, if I'm not in that state, I can still vote in a Twitter poll. And so those types of things are absolutely ridiculous in terms of a metric to measure some of these things. And yet we see that when it comes to the presidential primary, there are a lot of people, and this is a narrative, Rob, that the primary is already over because, Trump is ahead in the polls by 40 points. And I'm thinking, if that's your only metric, that's actually representative of literally nothing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And you make a good point. There's so many different ways to collect this data. And there's also, again, no oversight or regulation behind the data. So what if I'm a pollster and all these pollsters, most of them are paid by different political organizations, right? It's not a charity. It's a big dollar business. So what if I'm a pollster that is paid by, say, the Trump organization or the Trump campaign, and I take a poll and it doesn't give the results that the Trump campaign is going to like? What stops me from throwing that in the trash and taking another poll or taking more polls until I get the result that I'm looking for? Nothing stops them from doing that. Or what stops them from changing the crosstabs or the biases or the sampling size of the poll to get the results that they want? So basically what you're saying is both online and in real life, there's no transparency and these polls can be manipulated. And if these things are going to be used as a representation of democracy, then there should be compliance. There should be registration. There should be something. I mean, hearing and seeing Ronna McDaniel from the RNC even allow all of this that's going on, talking about canceling primaries and not having debates, when, like you said, Jenna, not a single vote has been cast. And what they're using to decide are these polls that we have proved are completely inaccurate and can be manipulated. The last thing I'll point to is a study that came out by Berkeley Haas, where they looked at 1,200 polls over the last 20 years of election cycles. They found that within 7 days, within 1 week of the election, those polls are still only 60% accurate. Weeks and months out from the election, those polls have no statistical relevance whatsoever. So if we're going to use these polls to represent democracy, then we better have more registration than it takes to sell a security here in the U.S. with these pollsters than we do with these polls. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Several things that you said, Rob, Salvador, that if we as a conservatives and most of us listening are Republicans in terms of the party, but even if you look at the Democrats as well, who aren't holding debates, and this is why RFK Jr. is now running as an independent, because he's saying the fix is in for Joe Biden, and conservatives would rightly point that out and say that's not how this should work. Even though he's the incumbent president, that doesn't mean that he just de facto gets the nomination. We still have a primary process in this country, and so on the flip side, for the Republicans, it's very concerning to see that the RNC is even suggesting that they might cancel some of the debates. And for anyone who is participating in this rhetoric that, the primary is done or we just need to cancel the primary, that is no more legitimate in terms of the process than what the left is trying to do to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot in several states under some wacky 14th Amendment theory. I'm not for either of those propositions. I am for free and fair elections and for the process to play out so that the voters can genuinely and accurately elect and select who they want to represent the Republican primary ticket. And so we should not, as conservatives, participate in any of this, it's over, it's done, what are you even doing? And, and Donald Trump's rhetoric saying that the RNC is wasting a lot of time and money. And, that's the process. And he actually has to earn the nomination. And if he does, then great, he has earned the nomination. But until that point, you have to continue to fulfill the process. I mean, it would be the same thing as ridiculous as Vladimir Zelensky right now suggesting that it's not the right time in Ukraine to hold elections and he just wants to cancel the election that's coming up in March of next year. That in America would be ridiculous. Well, we cannot allow anything like that to be the primary rhetoric in terms of especially the conservative party. And I think that's very dangerous. And it's a dangerous precedent to set, Rob, Salvador. And so in just the last minute I have with you, when you talk about, having polls that have transparency and have, some type of registration, I'm not really for government oversight over a lot of things or kind of the administrative state. But in terms of actually using this as in a campaign ad, there are regulations around that. And so this would be possible.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just a matter of, that's a great point you make, is that there are actual ways to get this done. It doesn't have to be some, to your point, everyone is talking about election integrity and making sure that we have fair and free elections. And that's how it should be on both sides of the aisle. And so to suggest that we can't do that, that's nonsense. There are ways to guarantee transparency. I mean, there's just ways to require better math. Again, just going back to the Trafalgar poll, they had a 1.8% response rate with one of the polls they put out, meaning 99% of people basically didn't answer them. So we just need to have some sort of better methodology that more represents what people might actually be looking at. You mentioned the Democrat side, in 2008, Barack Obama was down 40 points to Hillary Clinton because back then the establishment wanted Hillary to run. So, what you're seeing is that the mainstream media and the establishment tends to put out these polls that point at the person that they want to get the nomination. And so I agree with you. I think it's very important that voices like you, Jenna, are getting the message out there about the transparency of these polls and how, if they're going to be representative of this election process, it needs to be as open and honest as the rest of the entire process. Otherwise, we have a lot of problems here in the U.S., and we saw what happened during COVID when we allow, statistics to be presented to us that aren't accurate.
And
that
groupthink.
ends democracy.
Absolutely. And what would have happened in 2008? Yeah, what would have happened in 2008 if the Democrats were like, oh, Hillary is, 40 points ahead, so let's just cancel the primary? Well, actually that might have been better for America with everything that happened under the Obama administration, but it wouldn't have been fair, right? It would not have been fair to their voting base. And so that is the same ridiculous rhetoric that is now being propagated through a lot of the Trump supporters that is genuinely not conservative. It's not according to our process. And so I think that no true conservative should participate in that. But in terms of the polls, we as conservatives also need to be aware, well, it's not regulated and it's not administered. There's not any transparency, to be careful that regardless, whether it's the presidential primary or anything else, that we do not fall captive to a bandwagon fallacy. And we don't look at polls as an indicator of how we should think and how we should vote our values. So Rob, Salvador, always really appreciate it. With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to your to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you. My friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best night's sleep of your life. He didn't stop at the pillow. Mike also created the Giza Dream bed sheets. I have them. I love them. These sheets look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep, which is crucial for our overall health. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. It's ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets marketing prices, down as low as $29.98, depending on the size. So go to mypillow.com and click on the radio podcast square and use promo code Jenna, Jenna. There, you'll find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and so much more. I have all of this. I love it. Everything from MyPillow and also mystore.com. You can use promo code Jenna. So go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, and also mystore.com. And remember, use the promo code Jenna.